When I walked out of that office for the last time, the sound of their laughter followed me like a ghost. They called me the intern who got too ambitious. They said I'd never survive without them. But what they didn't know was that their betrayal became my blueprint. I didn't vanish. I rebuilt, in silence, in pain, in determination. So fierce it burned through every doubt they ever planted in me. And when I returned, not as their employee, but as the woman signing their paychecks, I didn't need to say a word, because true revenge doesn't scream, it smiles and waits. Where are you watching from tonight? My name is Claire Monroe, and for most of my 20s, I believed loyalty was the key to success. I gave everything to that company. My time, my weekends, my dreams. While others clocked out at 5, I stayed until midnight, building the kind of reputation I thought would protect me. For 5 years, I poured myself into Merrin & Cole, a luxury design firm in downtown Chicago. It wasn't just a job, it was my entire world. A place where I believed hard work would be noticed, where talent would speak louder than privilege. I was wrong. It started with small things. Ideas I presented in meetings suddenly became someone else's breakthrough. Reports I stayed up all night to polish ended up under another person's name. At first, I thought it was coincidence, that maybe my manager, Victoria, was simply overwhelmed, forgetting to credit me. But when my design proposal, a modern architecture concept I'd spent 3 months perfecting, became the company's flagship project, unveiled under Victoria's name, I realized this wasn't forgetfulness. It was theft. I still remember the day of the announcement. We were all gathered in the glass conference room, sunlight pouring through, the skyline gleaming behind us like a promise I couldn't touch. Victoria stood at the front, poised in her silk suit, hair flawless, voice smooth as honey as she said, "This project will redefine our image as innovators." And then she smiled at me. Not out of kindness, but warning. Everyone clapped. Everyone, except me. I sat there frozen, my throat tight, my hands trembling under the table. The applause blurred into a dull roar in my head, and in that moment, I understood something painful. In this world, talent meant nothing without power. After the meeting, she called me into her office. She poured herself a drink, whiskey, neat, and said, "You should be proud, Claire. The company's growing because of our teamwork." Her tone was sugar-coated poison. When I didn't answer, she smiled again, wider this time. "Oh, and by the way, about that promotion. Corporate decided you're not quite ready for management yet. Maybe next year." That was the moment I broke. Not loudly, but quietly, in the way people do when their soul starts to fracture. I went home that night, to my tiny apartment on the south side. I stared at the city lights through the window and asked myself if it was worth it. If years of sacrifice were just fuel for someone else's rise. For weeks, I tried to keep my head down. But office politics are a disease. Once you've been marked as weak, they spread around you like fire emails. I sent were ignored. I was excluded from meetings I used to lead. My desk, once right beside Victoria's, was moved to a corner near the printers, and every day I could hear them laughing behind my back. "Claire's trying too hard. She's emotional. She doesn't fit the company culture." They didn't fire me immediately. No, that would have been too merciful. Instead, they isolated me until I became invisible. Then, one afternoon, I was called into HR. They smiled, a rehearsed, sterile smile, and told me the company was restructuring. My position had been eliminated. I remember staring at the termination letter, feeling the paper tremble between my fingers. The HR rep said, "We're sorry, you've been a valuable part of the team." And then she looked down, already moving to the next file. When I stepped out of that office, the laughter started again. Soft, cruel, familiar. Victoria leaned against the glass door, whispering to one of her assistants, Told you she wouldn't last. I didn't look back, but I heard it, the laughter following me down the marble hallway, like ghosts clinging to my heels. I left with a single box of belongings, a plant, a few notebooks, and the company badge I would never wear again. But what I carried out that day was heavier than all of it combined. It was rage, not the kind that explodes, the kind that simmers, the kind that waits. I didn't know it then, but that was the last day anyone would laugh at me. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, tears drying on my cheeks, I made a promise. If the system was built to favor the powerful, then I would become the power. The days that followed were a blur of silence. My apartment, once filled with sketches and fabric samples, now felt like a tomb, a resting place for what used to be my ambition. The walls seemed to whisper everything I had lost. My phone barely buzzed anymore, except for the automated emails confirming the cancellation of my work accounts, my access badges, my corporate existence. For years, my identity had been tied to that company, to that building, to the people who laughed as I walked away. Without it, I felt hollow. But beneath the grief, something else began to grow, something sharper, heavier, and far more dangerous than sadness. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone, and in that emptiness, I started to think clearly. I stopped crying long enough to see the truth. They hadn't destroyed me. They had set me free. For so long, I had believed that my worth depended on their validation. Now, there was nothing left to lose, and that's where real power begins. I started small. I spent nights reading, studying, and planning. I took online courses on business strategy, marketing psychology, and leadership. My laptop became my new office, and my silence became my armor. Every time I felt the urge to seek revenge too soon, I reminded myself, timing is everything. The same people who mocked me for being too emotional would one day beg for my approval. I just needed to become someone they couldn't ignore. Weeks turned into months. I lived frugally, no luxury, no distractions. I survived on determination and coffee, pouring every ounce of energy into learning how to build something of my own. My dream was no longer to climb someone else's ladder. It was to build a tower so high that their company would look small beside it. Then, one night, an idea hit me. It came from the same place they had tried to destroy, my creativity. I remembered all the projects they had stolen, the designs they'd claimed as theirs. What if I created something that outshined all of it? Something that would redefine what luxury design could be. Not corporate, not sterile, but personal, emotional, human. That night, I stayed awake until dawn sketching. The first drafts were shaky, born from fatigue and anger. But as the days passed, they evolved into something breathtaking. I called it L'Homme-Fait-TA, a brand that would combine modern architecture with soulful artistry. My vision wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about meaning. Every design would tell a story. But dreams, no matter how beautiful, need fuel, and I had none. I didn't have investors, or family money, or connections. All I had was skill, and a reputation that was, by then, poisoned by rumors. I sent proposals to clients, and most never replied. Those who did recognize my name, and not kindly, "Didn't you work under Victoria Cole?" They'd ask, their tone sharp with gossip. Each rejection cut deep, but I refused to stop. I started freelancing, taking small projects for local CFVs, boutique hotels, and start-up offices. They paid little, but each job added something priceless, proof of my talent. Slowly, my name began to circulate again, but this time, attached to success stories, not pity. 2 years passed like that, quiet, relentless, disciplined. I didn't party. I didn't chase recognition. I chased mastery, and in the shadows of that silence, L'Homme-Fait-Atelier began to take form. I hired 2 interns, both women, both underpaid and underestimated by their previous employers. I saw myself in them. The same hunger, the same fire. Together, we built everything from scratch. The turning point came unexpectedly. A famous art collector named Elias Grant saw one of my designs in a local gallery. It wasn't even meant to be showcased. One of my clients had simply hung it in his lobby. But Elias noticed. He called me personally and said, "You have a gift. You just need a stage." That call changed everything. Elias introduced me to investors, clients, and galleries. Within months, L'Homme Atelier transformed from a small studio to a rising name in modern design. The same magazines that once ignored me now begged for interviews. My inbox, once empty, overflowed with opportunity. But success, as I learned, comes with echoes. Because with recognition came whispers. Whispers that reached the same office I had been thrown out of. Merrin and Cole, Victoria's empire. I saw their press release one morning while drinking coffee. An announcement that made my stomach twist with irony. They were launching a new design line, the name. Project Lumifer. I almost laughed. Even in their desperation, they couldn't help but steal. But this time, they had stolen from the wrong woman. Because now, I had resources, I had a voice, and most importantly, I had the truth. Instead of confronting them directly, I chose strategy. Revenge, I realized, is an art form. You don't just strike, you make them walk willingly into their own downfall. I hired a PR strategist, the best in the business, and began a subtle campaign. We leaked teasers of L'Homme Atelier's next collection titled The Phoenix Line. A rebirth from ashes, a poetic announcement that something powerful was coming. Within weeks, the design world buzzed with anticipation. Influencers, journalists, and investors all turned their gaze toward me. Then came the award season, the prestigious Ardent Design Gala, an event I used to attend as a low-level assistant, serving champagne to the very people who laughed at me. This year, L'Homme Atelier had been nominated for Innovator of the Year. When I walked into that ballroom in a black gown, the lights flashing and cameras clicking, I felt something deeper than pride. I felt balance. Across the room, I saw her, Victoria, still immaculate, still confident, but with the faintest trace of fear behind her eyes. When she noticed me, she approached, smile painted in professional grace. "Claire," she said. "It's been a long time," I returned the smile. "Not long enough?" The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 chandeliers that night. Gold light spilling across designer gowns, expensive smiles, and the same polished arrogance I once served drinks to. But I wasn't invisible anymore. The moment I stepped in, heads turned, cameras followed. Every click was a reminder that the girl they'd laughed at had not only survived, she had arrived. Victoria walked with her usual elegance, a glass of champagne in her manicured hand, her laughter the same hollow music I'd memorized years ago. But when our eyes met, her smile faltered. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't need to. I simply watched her the way she once watched me, from above, with quiet calculation. The ceremony began. Applause filling the air as names were called, awards handed, and speeches made. I sat calmly, listening, waiting, my heart steady like a slow drum. When the host finally spoke, his words wrapped around the moment like silk. And this year's Innovator of the Year award goes to Claire Monroe, founder of L'Homme Atelier. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the air, and in the sea of faces, I saw shock, envy, awe, and one woman frozen in disbelief. I stood, walked to the stage, and accepted the award. Its weight in my hands felt nothing like victory. It felt like closure. The host handed me the microphone. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every breath. I took one long pause, the kind that makes even silence feel electric. "Thank you," I began softly. "This means more than recognition. It's proof that no one can erase you when you know your own worth." The crowd leaned in. I continued, my voice steady but laced with something colder. Years ago, I was told I wasn't ready, that my ideas didn't belong to me. I was called emotional, difficult, replaceable. But I learned something. People only steal what they envy, and you can't bury someone who was born to rise. Every word was deliberate, every sentence, a blade wrapped in grace. I didn't say her name, but I didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew. The murmurs started almost immediately, spreading like smoke across velvet and crystal. I smiled, bowed my head slightly, and stepped down. The applause followed me. But I wasn't listening anymore. My eyes found Victoria in the crowd. Her face was pale, her hands gripping her glass so tightly, I thought it might shatter. But the night wasn't over. Later, as guests mingled, I felt a presence behind me. "Congratulations," she said, her voice calm but strained. "You've done well for yourself." I turned, meeting her gaze with the kind of composure I'd spent years mastering. "Thank you, Victoria. You taught me a lot." Her smile wavered. "I never meant for things to." I cut her off gently. "You did, and that's okay. You made me who I am." Before she could respond, a group of reporters surrounded us. One of them held up a tablet showing a leaked headline. "Exclusive. Former Merin and Cole employee accuses firm of intellectual theft. Industry whistleblower provides evidence." Victoria froze, her face drained of color. I didn't even have to look surprised. The work had already been done. Weeks earlier, while preparing for the gala, my legal team had compiled proof, emails, design drafts, timestamps, showing that the company's Project Lumi Fei was stolen from my early concept files. The evidence had been sent anonymously to journalists, timed perfectly for tonight's event. The crowd's attention shifted instantly. Reporters whispered, phones lit up, and murmurs grew louder. The elegant mask Victoria had worn for years cracked right before my eyes. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but no one was listening anymore. The industry she had manipulated for years had turned its gaze elsewhere. To me, I didn't humiliate her. I didn't need to. The truth was humiliation enough. I simply walked away, my heels echoing across the marble floor, her silence trailing behind me like the ghost of what used to be her power. Outside, the cold Chicago air hit my face, sharp and clean. The night felt infinite, the skyline glowing like a promise fulfilled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. The driver opened the car door, but I paused before getting in. I looked back at the building, the same kind of glass walls I'd once been trapped behind, and whispered to myself, they laughed when I fell. But now, they'll never forget my name. Then I smiled, stepped into the car, and let the city lights fade behind me. The weeks after the gala moved in slow motion, like the world itself was taking a deep breath. Headlines dominated every corner of the design industry. Corporate theft exposed. Lumpy Atelier declares a new era of leadership. Everywhere I looked. My name wasn't just attached to my work. It was attached to survival. Victoria, on the other hand, disappeared from the spotlight. First came the quiet resignation, then the investigation. Eventually, the collapse of Merin and Cole itself, the same empire that once told me I wasn't ready. Within 6 months, their name was dust, but my revenge didn't taste the way I thought it would. There was no triumphant music playing in my head, no celebration in my heart, because revenge, when it's complete, doesn't bring noise, it brings peace, and silence so powerful it humbles you. I remember standing in the new Lumpy Atelier headquarters, sunlight flooding through floor to ceiling windows, sketches lining the walls, my team bustling with quiet energy. There were laughter and coffee cups, plans for new collections, new dreams, and there, in that chaos, I realized something profound. I wasn't fighting anymore. I was creating. The pain that once defined me had transformed into purpose, and I made a vow that no one who worked under my name would ever be made to feel small. I would build an empire that didn't crush ambition, it nurtured it. One afternoon, I got a letter. No signature, just a single line written in delicate handwriting. I'm sorry, no address, no apology attached to a name, but I knew who it was from, Victoria. I placed the letter in a drawer and never replied. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes, it's simply letting go of the need to prove anything more. Because in the end, true revenge isn't about seeing them fall, it's about standing tall without needing them to see you at all. Now, whenever I look out from my office window and see the city below, I think of that girl who once walked home with a box of her things, tears in her eyes, laughter echoing behind her. She didn't die that day. She evolved, and every project I design now carries her spirit, that mix of pain, strength, and resilience that turned defeat into destiny. So to anyone watching this, anyone who's been betrayed, humiliated, or underestimated, remember this: they may laugh when you fall. They may celebrate your silence, but never forget. Silence is where the comeback is born. Because one day, they'll hear your name again, and this time, it won't be whispered. It'll be remembered. Where are you watching from tonight?